A misrecollection.
In the last few days, I've tried to persuade my colleagues that it would be eccentric to change governments when we're delivering so much and when we have such a vast mandate and when we're actually only a handful of points behind in the polls, even in mid-term after quite a few months of pretty relentless sledging, and when the economic scene is so difficult domestically and internationally. And I regret not to have been successful in those arguments, and of course it's painful not to be able to see through so many ideas and projects myself. Mr. Speaker, getting people off welfare into work.
Boris Johnson resigned on Thursday as leader of Britain's Conservative Party, paving the way for the selection of a new Prime Minister after dozens of ministers quit his scandal-hit government. The wave of resignations started on Tuesday despite Johnson's apology for not realizing that Chris Pincher, a former minister in charge of pastoral care, was unsuitable for a job in government after complaints of sexual misconduct were made against him.
It is clearly now the will of the Parliamentary Conservative Party that there should be a new leader of that party and therefore a new Prime Minister. And I've agreed with Sir Graham Brady, the chairman of our backbench MPs, that the process of choosing that new leader should begin now. And the timetable will be announced next week. And I've today appointed a cabinet to serve, as I will, until a new leader is in place.
Johnson's leadership came under intense scrutiny after an investigator's report in May criticized a culture of rule-breaking inside the Prime Minister's office in a scandal known as Partygate. The report described alcohol-fueled bashes held by Downing Street staff members in 2020 and 2021 when coronavirus pandemic restrictions prevented UK residents from socializing or even visiting dying relatives. 58-year-old Johnson has spent months battling to maintain his grip on power after the controversy saw him become the first-serving UK Prime Minister found to have broken the law.
And I want to begin today by renewing my apology to the House, to the whole country, for the short lunchtime gathering on the 19th of June 2020 in the Cabinet Room, during which I stood at my place at the Cabinet table and for which I received a fixed penalty notice. And I also want to say, Mr. Speaker, above all, that I take full responsibility for everything that took place on my watch.
You cannot be a lawmaker and a lawbreaker.
The final crisis came just weeks after Johnson survived a no-confidence vote in early June from his own Conservative Party members of Parliament, which ordinarily would mean he could not be challenged again for another year. But the influential 1922 Committee of Non-Ministerial Tory MPs is reportedly seeking to change the rules, with its executive committee planning to elect a fresh lineup of members next week.
And to you, the British public, I know that there will be many people who are relieved and perhaps quite a few who will also be disappointed. And I want you to know how sad I am to be giving up the best job in the world. Very much for her question.
A divisive figure until his last weeks in office, some will remember him as an outspoken and controversial leader, while others view him as a jolly and affable Prime Minister with a can-do attitude. Known for offensive gaffes as a politician, he based much of his career on waging war against the European Union and what he saw as its constraining rules.
Of course, I'm immensely proud of the achievements of this government, from getting Brexit done to settling our relations with the continent for over half a century, reclaiming the power for this country to make its own laws in Parliament, getting us all through the pandemic, delivering the fastest vaccine rollout in Europe, the fastest exit from lockdown, and in the last few months, leading the West in standing up to Putin's aggression in Ukraine.
Some Londoners reacting as Boris Johnson resigns as leader of Britain's Conservative Party had this to say.
About time, isn't it? Seriously. I mean, have you ever known anybody be so arrogant, ignorant, delusional? You know, the list goes on. I mean, it's interesting to see the people who've now found their integrity. You know, where was their integrity months ago? You know, it'll be interesting to see who now stands for leader of the Conservative Party now. Let's hope it's somebody that had their integrity a few months ago and not so recently.
You know, this is what happens when you've got a Prime Minister that has got no scruples. You know, lies after lies. How can you actually trust anyone, you know, especially in that position of trust? For me, I think he's betrayed the country, you know, and if there is no trust, you know, in a person in that position, then he has to go straight away, and he should have gone a long time ago.
I'm really not that interested. It will be one. It will be somebody that isn't going to do a great job, and we need to wait for an election and change that. It's not necessarily Labour, but somebody other than the Conservatives. Yeah.
Johnson received a police fine for the COVID-19 lockdown-breaking Partygate affair and faces a parliamentary probe into whether he lied to MPs about the revelations. In the frenzied hours building up to Johnson's announcement, opposition Labour leader Keir Starmer had welcomed his impending departure. But Starmer said a proper change of government was needed and demanded a no-confidence vote in Parliament, potentially triggering a general election, rather than Johnson clinging on for months and months.
But as we've seen at Westminster, the herd instinct is powerful. When the herd moves, it moves. And my friends, in politics, no one is remotely indispensable. And our brilliant and Darwinian system will produce another leader equally committed to taking this country forward through tough times, not just helping families to get through it, but changing and improving the way we do things, cutting burdens on businesses and families, and yes, cutting taxes, because that is the way to generate the growth and the income we need to pay for great public services.
Even while eyeing the exit, Johnson on Thursday sought to steady the ship with several appointments to replace the departed cabinet members. He had been clinging on to power despite a wave of more than 50 government resignations expressing defiance late Wednesday. But Thursday's departure of Education Minister Michelle Donnellan and a plea to quit from Finance Minister Nadhim Zahawi only in their jobs for 2 days appeared to tip the balance, along with warnings of a new no-confidence vote by Tory MPs.
Being Prime Minister is an education in itself. I've travelled to every part of the United Kingdom, and in addition to the beauty of our natural world, I found so many people possessed of such boundless British originality and so willing to tackle old problems in new ways, that I know that even if things can sometimes seem dark now, our future together is golden. Thank you all very much.
A timetable for a Tory leadership race will be announced next week. The leadership election will take place over the summer, and the victor will replace Johnson by the party's annual conference in early October, according to a report by the BBC and other news outlets.
And to that new leader, I say, whoever he or she may be, I say I will give you as much support as I can. And to you,
I need to do a
the British public,
I need to do a night stand.
I know that there will be many people who are relieved, and perhaps quite a few who will also be disappointed. And I want you to know how sad I am to be giving up the best job in the world. But them's the breaks. I want to thank Carrie and our children and all members of my family who have had to put up with so much for so long.